Hello, everybody, and welcome to This Week in X, presented by Crushing Comics. We think comics are better when they are read together, so we're here together to discuss this week's X-Men comics with each other and also with you. There's only one X-Men comic out this week, the 23rd of December, 2020, and that is Excalibur number 16. So here's your spoiler warning. We're going to talk about every single plot point in this comic, which probably entails us also talking about all of the plot points in Dawn of X up until this point, and probably a lot of the history of the X-Men and also other events in the Marvel Universe. So this is a thoroughly spoiled set of conversations, and you have been warned. With that out of the way, let's welcome our guests, my co-hosts, Tyler and Fariha's designated survivor mutant, Harry. Before we start getting into individual plot points, I just wanted to have a go round to Tyler and then to Harry, and then I'll go about what is your kind of lightning round first impression of this issue before we start experiencing it together.
Overall, I enjoyed the issue. I love that Marcus Toll is back on the art, and it looks beautiful. This particular story issue feels a lot more organic in terms of the plot and the interactions between the characters, and it also tied into other titles. And you know, like Peter mentioned earlier, no surprise here. There is a direct link to X of Swords, and then you know, on the con side, there are two things which I do not quite like in this issue, but we can discuss that in details later on in this episode.
All right, Harry, what about you?
I liked it. This is a book with a lot of stuff happening all the time, which has been kind of a pro and con so far. I felt this issue was very focused. It's very much about the fallout of what happened in X of Swords, which was kind of nice to have almost every scene be about the absence of one character and kind of like feeling all that out. And yeah, I mean, this book is slowly growing on me with every issue, and I really like this one.
For me, it kind of felt like a little bit of a step back. I feel like we really found a great rhythm during X of Swords with Excalibur. And part of it was nothing felt extraneous. Like it was about Betsy. It was a little bit about Jubilee. It was about Apocalypse. And that felt like the real plot engine. And now we're back to dealing with Gambit, Rogue, and Richter. And it just, to me, still feels like they don't have a part in this Excalibur story. They're not magical. Like we're trying to pretend like Richter's into magic now. And Rogue has kind of taken the fore because she's looking for her friend. But it just really emphasized to me that as good as Teenie Howard is with voices, I still just don't really feel like it's the right cast, which is a shame because like Tyler, I love Marcus Toe and I actually love Teenie Howard. But we'll get into some of the points about why I just feel like this cast doesn't really click as we continue this discussion. And actually, it's a good point to kind of start out with here, is that this cast has always been a series of pairs with one odd man out, one kind of third wheel or fifth or seventh wheel, as the case may be, right? Because Gambit and Rogue have each other. Jubilee looks after Shogo. Richter, who usually is the Shatterstar, has been paired with Apocalypse as this kind of like mentor-mentee relationship. And then we have kind of Betsy all by herself. And really she's with Britain, right? She's with the Magic, she's the team leader. But in the absence of Betsy, because if you didn't read X of Swords, she was shattered in the first tournament fight in X of Swords. And even though the rest of the Captain Britain Corps was regenerated, Betsy seemingly was not. There's no one person that's like the one person that misses her, right? She's got Brian, who misses her as her brother, but he's married to Megan. Rogue misses her as a friend, but she's got Gambit. And that's kind of what creates the tension in this issue for me. And it kind of results in them going to Blob, which feels like Teenie Howard just going down the list of like, who could they talk to about Betsy that we haven't seen? Oh, let's talk to Blob. I don't know. Is it just me that really realizes here in this issue that Betsy has been the odd one out this whole time?
I mean, in some ways it is, but you know, without the Braddock connection, you can't really call this title Excalibur. True.
Like she's there to be paired with the title.
Yeah,
yeah,
I think so. And you know, the link to Otherworld, Avalon. I do agree that like who will miss Betsy? I mean, in some ways, I feel like Douglas would too.
That's a deep cut. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like, yeah, let's go on. Sorry.
No. Go ahead.
Well, I feel like they all miss Betsy. That's kind of the point of the issue, where everybody is kind of responding to the loss. That's kind of like, you're asking me who's missing her. It seems like the entire issue is about them all reacting to the absence in the team, which is kind of the reason I liked it, because it felt a little bit more singular about her, even though she's not really in it until later on.
Yeah, I guess that was what it was at surface level for me. And as I tried to dig in more, it was kind of like I realized that it felt like Teenie Howard was deliberately breaking Rogue's attention away from Gambit stuff and also being angry at Apocalypse, which is still here to like make Rogue the one who is focused on Betsy, which I think also works because Rogue has a history with Betsy. They were on the team together before and into the Outback era. They've been in many iterations of the team together. But I kind of was just reflecting on, this is kind of like my eternal problem with this cast, is like, I don't know if they fit around as much. They tend to kind of just pair off and do their thing. And now you're like kind of asking me to like believe that Richter is there for a reason without Apocalypse, and he doesn't even mention Shatterstar, and X Factor doesn't mention Shatterstar to him when they go and visit. Why? They just saw Shatterstar.
Yeah.
So I guess I was just reflecting on it that way. Like, not that the book is like that nobody cares about Betsy, but it kind of just exposes how paired off a lot of these people are from a plot perspective to me.
I feel like this was one of the few issues where they did all seem to kind of click as a team. This is the one where I was like, oh, okay. I mean, they do have that like that big moment where X Factor's like, yes, like Excalibur is the magic team, but they felt more established and more cohesive. Like I agree with what you're saying, like as a whole through the book, but this is the one issue where I feel like it was kind of congealing in a way, which was refreshing.
Tyler?
I mean, I agree with like both of you to a certain extent. I'm kind of in the middle. I like that the team is working together and being, having had some adventure with Betsy. They kind of is the de facto team to go search for her. But I also agree with Peter that the initial conception of this team, the way that they're being brought together, wasn't as organic as it could be, because like I think Jubilee basically just stumbled upon the team and then Apocalypse just dragged her through, and then that kind of thing. And and so in that way I felt I agree with Peter that the team doesn't have really a reason to be around, to be called Excalibur, except for the fact that since the beginning of Dogs they have been together. So I also do not buy the relationship between Apocalypse and Richter, because I don't think that has been established enough. It seems like there's one throwaway line in Creations between Beast and Archangel that I remember really clearly, because they were comparing Rockslide and Summoner and Apocalypse and Richter. And then before that, I know that there have been a little bit of mention here and there, how Apocalypse has been teaching Richter certain things, but it still felt pretty odd to me.
I really was thinking about that as I was reading, and I kind of went back to Excalibur wasn't number 1, it was 2 or 3, where like Richter's super depressed and Apocalypse is like, why are you depressed when you have a connection to this earth that kind of matters? And I think that if anything, maybe the title has undersold that aspect of Richter a little bit. Like I do believe that the intent is that his connection to Apocalypse is that Apocalypse has kind of like given him meaning at a time that he's really felt directionless. And I think that tracks here in this issue with his kind of like, we need to use this book, and his whole thing with Gambit of like, why would Apocalypse go? And Gambit's like, Apocalypse didn't just go, he voluntarily left us. And so that's kind of interesting, but I had to really take a step back and like flip through digitally some past issues to remind myself of that. I think we're kind of playing it a little bit subtle. I could have used a restatement of purpose here from Richter, even though he's clearly missing Apocalypse, but I felt like we were like missing a little bit of the like why.
Yeah. And also I don't know how him using his powers on Krakoa is going to help him reach Apocalypse. So like that connection I'm also missing a little bit. Even though he has the book open in front of him, like, is he casting a spell to try and reach Apocalypse, or is he trying to use his connection to Earth, which is not correct here, because Earth technically here in this issue is Krakoa, which is a mutant and not a mutant island, and not really, Earth. So that's the part which I sort of like got really there's a big question mark when I went through that small that few pages.
Yeah, I mean, I did the same thing that you did, Peter, where I kind of read through a few of the earlier issues just to get my bearings after the crossover. And I was really into the Apocalypse and Richter stuff, but I do agree that like it does feel a little underserved, a little subtle, as you said. It's almost like just this book's juggling so much stuff that sometimes things get lost in the shuffle. And I wonder if that's happened with that kind of development a little bit. So when you get to this issue and it's like, man, he's really torn up that Apocalypse is gone, much more so than anybody else. It's like you have to like did a scene happen that I can't remember or whatever, but you kind of have to take it or leave it, I guess.
Well, and also, so I want to drive a little bit through that point to something Harry mentioned a moment ago, which is, are they the magical experts now? Like, there's this handoff. They have this great scene with the X Factor team, which I think acknowledges a lot of little brilliant touches of continuity inside of it. And Rogue is like, y'all are not taking this seriously, and storms off. And Rachel says, it's not that we didn't take it seriously, it's that our capacity has ended and kind of your capacity has begun. And then we get what usually is the squad moment, right? They're all walking out and they're like, we're the ones who know about magic. And I'm looking at this page and I'm like, Rogue, Gambit, Jubilee, and Richter know about magic. Now, granted, they go and get Megan because they realize actually they need a little bit more of a connection. But I think even with a reread, I'm just not sold that these four are the experts on magic.
They've been around magic. I don't know if they're
exposure on a resume. You do exposure to magic.
Free exposure to magic. But they aren't really like adept in the arts or what have you. I kind of buy Richter's thing a little bit more than the both of y'all. I feel I think he's the one where like I think he gets the pass a little bit. But yeah, the other three, I'm just like, it's fun that you guys are wearing the magic clothes, but I think you need a little bit more than that.
No, but I mean, yes, Richter is now a druid, but like in Excalibur so far, he basically just, I couldn't sleep. So he wakes up and he walks and he stumbled upon people who would tell him what to do. So I don't know how skilled he is, like, from magic. He basically said, I can't sleep, walked outside, discovered something, exposition, and then he's like, oh, okay, now I know what to do.
Maybe Krakoa has no magic experts whatsoever, and this truly is the A team that's figuring this stuff out.
I mean, I do buy that they are the team to go into Otherworld right now, maybe because they have been there before, and they have been there like for quite a long time. Since Docs, most of it has happened over there. And Jubilee do have a connection with the sorcerers of the green sorcerers. Yeah, so maybe that kind of helped a little bit. I mean, to be honest, I didn't really think too much about that. I'm like, okay, it's Excalibur. I mean, they have to be the one to go find Betsy, and I mean, talking about X Factor here, right? Did any of you notice that there was a new member?
Sure did.
Who was the new member?
It was Aurora, was it not?
Yeah.
Oh, that she's like permanently sitting in with them
she
now.
had a costume and everything.
Costume and everything.
Yeah. Looked good too. They had cool costumes. Yeah, I like that. Was actually part I really liked, where like they are bringing in the newer books and what have you, and stuff with Sinister and X Factor into this book, and it didn't feel too out of place. It all meshed very well, and I'm glad that like the more recent titles are starting to get play in the other series.
I mean, this part is one of the things that I did not quite like, and it has to do with Rogue. I mean, Tini generally has, like Peter said, has a very good handle on characters' voices, But over here, I feel like Rogue is written kind of like Remender's Uncanny Avengers Rogue, which is like capital, all caps BAD bad.
So upset. So
I
mad.
really don't like it. And luckily it only lasted a little bit. So for me, it was like when it came to that point, I was like, oh, why is Rogue acting like that? It's like it.
She compared him to some backwater human police department, which I'm like, that is a specific and I think uncalled for burn. I don't know why you're coming to the table so mad, but
well, look,
yeah.
I actually noticed Rogue's voice, but I had a really different reaction than Tyler did. So to me, Rogue is general. I know Dazzler's behind me, but if I had like a top three, it's like Dazzler, Jean, and Rogue. And I have a Rogue that's been somewhere, I don't know where she is, but she's usually by my desk. Yeah. And for me, Rogue has gone through this really interesting journey where she was kind of on the outs after the Extreme X-Men period, even though she was back in the team, but she didn't really have a place. And starting with Mike Carey's Supernovas and then through Mike Carey's X-Men Legacy, Rogue kind of really comes into her own that she can make decisions and be in charge. She doesn't have to be led by doubt all the time. And there's a lot of moments in that run where like Cyclops is like, no, Rogue, you were wrong. And at first Rogue is kind of like, oh, I guess so, Scott. Yeah. And by the end, Rogue starts pushing back and she's like, no, I wasn't wrong. And that to me was like the peak of where I needed Rogue's character to go to, which is that she didn't always need other people to tell her if she was correct or not. Like she could decide for herself, not saying that she needed to be right all the time. And I think here, something I really like about it is this is a Rogue who has already decided on an action, right? She is like, we are going to get to the bottom of this Psylocke thing. And I've decided that because if Psylocke isn't here, or Betsy, I should say, and Apocalypse isn't here, that means I'm in charge. And to me, it kind of is, it's subtly different than the Rogue that Remender was writing in Uncanny Avengers, which was a very like early version of Rogue. It was like Rogue as Wolverine, right? Rogue, when she first joined the team and she didn't do anything right and she was always aggressive. To me, that Rogue was a very like Uncanny X-Men 171 Rogue.
Yeah, it was more like a teenage angst Rogue, it's like
all she wanted to do was punch Scarlet Witch. That was like her entire deal. That entire story was, I hate you, and that's all I'm about in this book.
And to be fair, now the entire island of Krakoa just wants to punch the Scarlet Witch. She was ahead of her time.
I mean, and not to derail it too much, I mean, she was like, she went into Avengers Mansion and she took down all the pictures of Avengers and put up all the pictures of X-Men. I'm like, what the...
Oh,
that's such a
let's
petty,
just say, so she is petty. Let's just have the consistency of her pettiness to recognize here. Yeah. And also, I mean, another great Rogue book was that the Uncanny Avengers continued into all different with Duggan. And again, Rogue was like portrayed as this just like headstrong character. She wasn't always the leader, but she was somebody who had a plan. So it's interesting how Tyler and I don't think either of us are right. I think we're just like seeing two sides of this coin where it's fun to see Rogue be in charge, but because of what we've seen in the past, it's really easy to go over that line and turn her into like pushy, angsty, mean kind of Rogue. And it's a delicate balance. Well, and also let's not forget what's happened with her in the past couple of years with Kelly Thompson, where her power is a little bit out of control again, but she almost has like faith that it's going to work or that they're going to get to the bottom of it in a different way than when her powers didn't used to work. And it became very like, well, it was me because she has Gambit, which whether you like it or not, is a facet of her character now that she's willing to relinquish some of that control that she used to have all the time because she trusts Gambit to have part of that control too, which I think now is permanently a part of her character until they're broken up, But while we're talking about this craft level, let's talk a little bit about the artwork here from Marcus Toe on line art and Eric Arciniga on color art. I mean, I love Marcus Toe. I think he's so clean. We go on and on rhapsodizing about, Lara's and Joshua Cassara, but Toe is something different to me because it's just all so beautifully clean. It's not heavily lined. He really lets the shapes of the characters and the gesture work of the characters kind of do the work. And he does some good facial acting too. And I think that this just reminded me of like, I just love him on this book and how clean the artwork is.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it reminded me a little bit. I mean, it veered a little bit too much to the cartoony side, especially with how the faces are a little bit squished this way. So, but I mean, I got used to his art like really fast. Like the first issue of Excalibur, I was like, I'm not 100% sure. And then later on, when as you get used to drawing these characters, I really enjoyed it. And the colors in this
Yeah.
book have always been really bright and saturated. I mean, is it me or is that the case here?
I
Totally
think
agree,
that
yeah.
contributes to it feels like it's very 1990s throwbacky X-Men, and like that's maybe part of why Gambit and Rogue are here. Is it's like X-Men for people who loved X-Men animated series and like Jim Lee era, and I think that it has the most pushed colors of everything, and I think it's deliberate. I don't think you just get Eric Arcinier on a title and he just does these colors. I think it's meant to very deliberately evoke a very specific period of Blue Team X-Men, and that's why it looks like it does, and that's why they have these kind of like bold, declarative artists like Toe to just make it have this very kind of cartoon animated feel to it. I put Toe in the same group as like Perry Perez, who's drawing Spider-Woman right now, who's done some X-Men, and maybe also Oscar Baladuza, who did Mr. and Mrs. X with Kelly Thompson. He kind of draws those like little kid faces a little bit, but again, he does those really plain, clear faces. He doesn't put a lot of lines, especially on women's faces, and he lets the color work do it. And I think that to me, that's like Team Rogue now. Like, I'm like, okay, well, if you're going to draw Rogue, you better be Marcus Toe, Perry Perez, or like Oscar Baladuza, because I feel like they've kind of redefined how I expect her to look.
Yeah.
It's just really, really solid. And the colors, I think, make Otherworld just seem really special and vibrant. And it's just, it tells it. Yeah. Like even when, there's things happening that I don't totally have a grip on, which I think is the issue with this book. Like the art can just carry you home because it just looks so nice, and solid is not in like a backhanded compliment way. I think it really is just great storytelling.
Yeah, and I feel the same about clean. I don't mean clean to be like not detailed enough. I think there's such a visual impact. Let's go back to the story now, where they get to Otherworld. They come through the gate in that big team shot, and then we get the reverse of that team shot, which is the throne. And just like the boldness of the color work and the clarity of the figure work there of Jamie and Captain Avalon and Megan Gloriana with Maggie on the stairs. It's like great composition, almost as if they're like posing for like a painting of this royal family to be painted. And it also just gives a really great visual cue of like Otherworld's even more saturated, and especially in Avalon, red just carries through everything in a way that it doesn't on Krakoa usually.
He draws Brian's new costume really well. Like it just looks, it's like regal and kind of strong without coming off like an action figure. Like if you didn't have the dialogue in this page, you could understand like all these characters' situations and kind of like emotional states just from looking at it.
And did you also notice the motif carried through all four of what they're wearing, that they all have this like banded armor look? It's on Brian. Megan's got it in the bodice of her dress. The little girl has it in the center of her dress. And then Jamie has it in his belt, which I didn't actually notice until like read number 3. And I was like, oh, that's so good. It's part of what gives that spread so much punch is that they actually have things to tie them into each other.
Well, it's the same with Excalibur, right? He gave them like straps, horizontal leather straps across the costume.
Well, that's just their medieval LARPing costumes.
Yeah, that's just how they LARP.
They really worked hard on this. You got to respect the consistency.
I do kind of like it the most on Jubilee because I think her like orange trench coat at this point we've just seen it so many times and is visually similar to Gambit. Yeah. And so Jubilee now kind of gets that high collar and the crosses to hold it together. Whereas Gambit, if you look at his, it's like a tunic over a coat or a coat over, because it's got layers. It's not one big trench coat. So it's like, again, part of his LARPing getting into character is now he's got this many layered thing and he's not just in a strap. Rogue, of course, basically is like, I'm just wearing my leather jacket and just puts the straps across the center. No real change for Rogue.
I think Richter looks good. I like just how hard he's going into the druid thing, where it's just he's got the face paint, he's got the hood. It really just shows that he's in a completely different headspace if you want to buy into that, which it seems like I have more so. But
and he got flowers on the hoodie too.
A little nod. Well, I'm glad
these guys have got.
Oh, go ahead, Harry.
I was gonna say these guys have gotten a little crazy since they've come to Otherworld. They really like lived it up.
Well, I mean, to me, this is the fun of talking about it together, because just because Richter's not hitting for me, it doesn't mean that it doesn't hit, period. I think if all three of us got together and was like, no, it doesn't hit, then we would need to call up Fariha and get her opinion. Yeah. But I think that that's part of the fun of doing it in a go-round. But something that all three of us have enjoyed all through this point is Jamie Braddock and his relationship with Mr. Sinister. So throughout the scene, what we all thought was just a visual gag in X of Swords, which is the plumage cape. He's got it discarded on the chair, then he's picking it up and he's kind of fluffing it like as if you had laid a blazer down and you're trying to like shake it back into shape. And then he puts it on, and then we get this great silhouetted shot of him going through the gate, resplendent in his plumage, only to find that indeed it's an actual plot point and he's using it as a bartering chip with Sinister, which I just think is wild. Like, who would have thought that our favorite joke from X of Swords was actually going to turn into a plot point here?
It's kind of quietly brilliant, just how nice it is to have that kind of like gag and just kind of like joyful thing, it like just factored back into the story later. It's really cool.
Yeah, it cracks me up because like, the first thing that you saw of Jamie right here is like, he's using the cape as a seat cushion on his throne. It's just like great there. I mean, the other thing also, it could be like Tini and Toe is like, okay, I really love the cape, but I'm tired of drawing it. I'm tired of putting it. Let's give it back to Sinister and then be done with it.
Well, also, cool. I think something, Tyler, did you point this out? Jamie is not wearing the same thing when he gets to Bar Sinister that he was wearing when he left Avalon, is he?
Yeah. So there's one part of me who's like, okay, is it because he was the regent of Avalon, and that's why when he's there, he automatically is garbed in like dress armor, and then the moment he steps through to Krakoa, everything disappears and he's in his normal clothing, which is basically just something wrapped around him.
Or he took off his shirt to go see Sinister, which is another option we can ponder for a bit. I think that's equally likely. I think you could go either way. I just love these two talking because they're both just like such like scheming, like stinkers. It's just fun, like watching them like kind of respect each other on some level because they're both just being kind of conniving people. But it's like, it's kind of fun,
But let's talk about
Betsy.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a second, because Jamie has the power to manipulate reality and theoretically do whatever the hell he feels like. He has pulled on the strings of reality to bring Betsy back before in the end of that Chris Claremont New Age run we were talking about previously. And as we've seen in this run to point, he's actually created a splinter reality that had a bunch of copies of this team in it already. So what do we make of him going to Sinister for a copy of Betsy's body when by all accounts, he just the body copying part, he could do himself, right? He's not the full 5, but he can at least do that much. Why does he go to Sinister?
I don't know. I mean, part of it has to do with the fact that I think Section 9 is like basically tell him don't muck with the dimensions.
So
this
he wants plausible deniability.
So,
pretty much,
And then he's like, oh, I did not create her. She just appears one day.
This is a homegrown version of Betsy. I didn't do my powers at all, I don't know what's going on, but she's here. So I mean, I just figured it was like, you don't want to just go break the rules that Saturn 9 put into place, an issue or two ago.
Well, at the end here, we wind up in a field and we get a little bit of mutant magic. Richter's like, we've got Megan to act as our sort of magical bloodhound, but it's not enough. And by our powers combined, which Jubilee even makes the joke, that they can be something more. But there's something different too. It's like a different chemical reaction, right? They don't have Betsy this time. They don't have Apocalypse, but they do have Megan, and they have all of their other powers. And so they're another form of mutant machinery, even though it's magic. To me, the magic spell itself is less interesting than the fact that this mutant machine motif seems to be really present here so far in Reign of X, even with just a handful of issues to our name so far. Did you feel that?
Third machine.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I wonder if it's, you have to imagine it's building to something. Like at this point, there's been 3 separate books that are touching on it. So I would imagine this is going somewhere rather than just the same themes being explored.
No. I mean, definitely, right? Because we see a similar data page in Hoxpox, talking about machines, talking about different levels of society, and this is all like synergy, everything working together. So I mean, it is going somewhere. for sure.
To me, it would be really
And
interesting if
this
we
is
wind
not
up with
new.
like almost every team is a machine almost, or like every
It's
book has a
a
machine, and then we start
Yeah.
exploring. Like that to me is really interesting because now we've got Sword. X Factor, even though it hasn't been explicit, certainly is a machine, and plus X Factor also has the Five, who's another machine.
Oh yeah.
I'm definitely going to be keeping a close eye on these other books to see if this
Mhm.
emerges in books like X Force to come to the Four Hellions as well.
Mhm.
Not a whole. I don't have a whole lot other to say about that because I feel like we talked about Richter
Well, I mean,
and
this is
Magic
not
already.
new. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
this
for
is not
sure.
new too, right? At this point, because if you go back to like Excalibur issue 5, one of the data page in well, I don't know what that word is, like alignment for higher power formation. So this whole mutant, so it's sort of like we have to pay attention. We have to go back and take a look and see where these things have been seeded and how it's going to play out, which I think is probably one of the more interesting things to have come out since X of Swords.
Mhm.
Well, and we end on a shocker. You know, they do this spell theoretically to summon Betsy. Instead, they summon the Captain Britain Corps, who are like, "We're with you. We think we should find your Betsy too." But then, surprisingly, me, because I didn't think it was going to happen so soon, we do find what seems to be our Betsy, and she's the Queen of England, and she's got Warren as Angel bringing her morning tea in bed to kind of mirror the first scene with Gambit and
Yeah.
Rogue enjoying, you know, their vacation breakfast. I was shocked. I mean, I did not think I was going to turn the page and get to this. I don't know. How did you two take this?
I cackled. I was like, good for you, man. Get some nice food, some relaxation. You're clearly in some kind of dream universe or some kind of alternate world. But for right now, you should enjoy whatever it is you have going on.
No, but it mirrors the beginning of this issue, right? Because this issue, Gambit cooks breakfast for Rogue. And then here you have Warren to bring her, well, presumably breakfast to in bed. And that brings another connection between Betsy and one X-Men, which is Warren. And that has been, well, I mean, that was done pretty well by Remender in Uncanny
Yeah, it's pretty
X-Force.
definitively done in Uncanny X-Force to the point that I'm almost shy of touching it again.
Going back to it, yeah. Well, I view this more as like a, not a dream, but something kind of ethereal. So it's more like her greatest wishes being expressed or what have you. I'm assuming. Yeah. So it's not like it's like hard continuity for me, you know.
But to me, this is interesting because through our discussion, it makes me realize you were right, Harry, all along. Like this whole issue is about who Betsy has connections with. And the whole point is that Betsy doesn't have any one person, but Betsy's actually the center of a lot of relationships with Rogue, with her brothers, you know, even with Warren. And this is kind of to point that out. Like she's not somebody who can just disappear from the fabric of X-Men unnoticed. So I don't know. Now that we've been through it all as a discussion, I kind of see it more than I did, I think, when I read it by myself. So, gentlemen, final call. Is there anything from this issue, which we've gone through quite thoroughly here, that still merits a mention before we wrap up?
Yes. There's one page where Richter was trying to, you know, use his power on Krakoa, and there was this focus on this strange violet flower.
I saw that. Jumped out at me.
Yeah.
You think it had significance?
I don't know, because I was thinking like it could be one of those the one that opens the gate to the no place because of the color. And I went back to compare when Cardinal planted it in Power of X, Power of 10, I think issue 3 or issue 2. I can't. Or maybe even issue 1. Issue 1. Sorry. So in issue 1, and then but it doesn't look the same, you know. But then again, it's drawn by two different artists, so you know it could be open to interpretation, or it could be nothing. So
for me, I've kind of forgotten about the other flowers because we've been so focused on the gate flowers that I almost needed to go back and be like, oh, that's right. There's actually several different flowers that we've mostly only been focusing on the gate flowers and the medicine flowers and marauders, but there's other things happening too. Harry, anything else that has escaped our all-seeing eye in this discussion?
I just like that, you know, because my biggest concern leaving X of Swords was, you know, you're taking a pretty big character from Excalibur, you know, off the board. getting rid of Apocalypse, and like a lot of those early issues had friction with him as part of the book. So I was just happy that I feel like the team or the book worked well without this big character. That was because I was worried that it would go the other way. I was just kind of pleased with that. That's just more like a quality thing than a plot thing. But
well, that brings us to the end of This Week in X. If you enjoyed being a part of this discussion with us, you should subscribe because you will hear more every week, not only about This Week in X, but other comics topics as well, because we really believe that comics are better when they are read together. Now, originally this week, there were supposed to be more issues on the slate. They got moved around due to the holiday, so we might be back next week with an unpredictable number of issues. It's kind of hard to know for sure. It seems as though it's going to be X-Men and Wolverine, but we will see what transpires. So on behalf of myself, Tyler, and Harry, thank you so much for joining us for another This Week in X, and be well.
Bye.
bye.